I'm pleased to be here today and to talk about what we have been doing in JAS in the past years. And we started off at university in Dortmund, where we are, some group of us was teaching, and we started off as lectures on architecture, on urban design, and then soon we started doing workshops, and that was 10 years ago. And today we are a non-profit organization. Next slide. A non-profit organization that does built environment education all over Germany. We work project-based, meaning we don't have a continuous financing. We always get money by project, meaning if we have a project idea, we get partners and then we apply for grants, or we have clients that ask us to come in to do projects. And next slide, just to give you an idea, we started off in the Ruhr area, like I said, in Dortmund, where some of us were teaching at university. But then over the years, people moved away and built up different groups all over Germany, so that we are now a group of about 50 people from different professions, meaning we have people that are trained as architects, but we also have people trained as urban planners and regional planners. We have landscape architects in the team. We have pedagogues and teachers and museum pedagogues, for example, that work with us. Also people from social work that are members. And we do projects all over Germany now. About 500 we did in the past years. We had about 10,000 people, young people and children especially, but also teachers who take part in our extended learning program and classes. And we do cooperational projects and presentations all over the world. As you can see, this is when an occasion like this, we get invited to talk about what we do, but also in some cases like a European Union project where we partner up with 5 countries, associations and of different types in 5 countries to do a project all across Europe. Next slide. I am asked today to talk about participatory design. As I described already, we started off doing purely architecture education. Teaching about architecture, about cities, about planning, explaining what's it all about, doing more like workshops about sensitizing architecture, understanding architecture, pretty much hands-on workshop, as you probably all know them. But then one by one, we were more and more asked by clients to do participation projects, meaning cities were planning a plaza, or they were doing a city extension plan, or they're doing a school design, as the next presentations are going to be about. And we were asked to do the participation projects. And this is right now the main field, I would say, where most our projects are. They are about participation. And now you wonder why? I mean, participation is tough. Yes, and normally administration and a lot of architects and planners don't want to do participation because it's a lot of work and you never know what the public thinks and wants. But we have to do it by law. We have a federal building code law, the Baugesetzbuch, and there under number 3 you see public participation explained. It has to be done as early as possible, and they added 3 years ago, one sentence you can see here in red. Children are also considered part of the public. Meaning, suddenly, planners and architects are not only asked to let the public, the adults, participate, but they're also asked to let children participate in the future design and planning of cities, buildings, and other spaces. Next slide. And when we talk about participation of children and young people in planning, then we have to look at the different scales where we design, or where we discuss the future shaping of cities, not only, but also regions, Also objects, so we can talk about an object like a building or street furniture, where the voices of children are to be heard, especially when we talk about the modernization or the alterations of buildings, school buildings, for example, is one example. Then the next scale of planning, I would consider the public space, so street design, the design of plazas, for example, where we are asked to include children's perspectives in these plannings. In Germany, we also have legal binding plans on this scale, where children are asked to give their voice and opinion about it. Next slide. The next scale would be on neighborhood level, meaning we have neighborhood development plans in Germany. Bigger cities, for example, have these neighborhood development plans for especially neighborhoods in need to coordinate investments and activities in these neighborhoods, for example. Actually, to get subsidized money into that neighborhoods, every community, every city has to provide one of these neighborhood plans. And especially when it comes to leisure, education, sports facilities, playgrounds, schoolyards, also the local networks, transportation. I mean, young people are the #1 users of transportation. So they have a great knowledge how transportation works, and if it not works, they know very well. So these are the points where young people and children get involved into doing these plans and also talk about implementations. And then I get to the last scales. There we are already on the citywide scale. And on the regional scale is to imagine how the future of a whole city is like. Cities today, at least in Germany, they have to provide a vision for the next 20, 30 years. So there are plans that are adaptable, but nevertheless that somehow guide the future development of a city and of regions. So this is also a scale where young people and children are asked to participate, and it's the most challenging because it's talking about the future of the city that children will experience as adult. It's a very abstract thing also for children and young people, and it's boring. I mean, come on, talk about the regional plan. So that's the challenge, I think, in some of these plans and also planning processes to make them interesting for children. I even would say for children it's a little bit more easier, it's still challenging, than for young people. They have other interests. They don't want to talk with you of a legal binding plan. That's not interesting to them. So you have to somehow get the topic that catches their interest. Now I will demonstrate that on 3 projects we did, just to give you an idea how this participatory planning and participation works. Next slide. Let me, but still, do a few more words about the challenges of children's and young youth participation. It's demanding and complex. Some of these planning processes, they are about not only they're always about not only the voices of young people. They're also about the voices of adults, of a different interest group, and to make kids and young people understand that it is a balancing, that it is a strong discussion, is very hard for them to see the nature of planning, fighting over things and fighting for the right solution. Then the abstract goals of planning. I mean, I don't know, or design. I don't know if sustainable design is something that sounds in your ears. Yeah, we somehow have some pictures in our head what we mean by sustainable design, but if you talk to children and young people about sustainable design, it's a very abstract thing for them. So we have to break it down to make them, to make us understandable, and that's a tough thing, as you know by yourself, teaching and working with young people and children. Then there is a huge gap between planning and implementation, meaning you do all this participation and the worst case is it's not going to get implemented. And that is the killing moment for a lot of things, for future participation. If young people and children make that experience, they participate in a process, give their ideas, work very hard. In the end, nobody cares about them. they remember situations like that. That's why very careful, never do participation if you're not sure that you can implement something out of this whole work. This challenge is also the time between plan is made, design is made, and until the building is ready or the plaza is actually redesigned. I mean, even in Germany, to plan a school, it's from the plan to the school is opening about 4 years. So most likely the kids that participate in the design process will never experience the school they're planning. So that is a challenge. And you somehow have to bridge that challenge. And I think some of these examples I'm showing are explaining that gap. What else? Fail to reach and keep attracted children and young people. Some of you who have done participation know you do all this preparation, prepare workshop, and nobody shows up, or only 2. Or you have a youth group you're working with, you start off with 10, and by the end of the day there are only 3 left, because the others, I don't know, had something more important to do. So participatory design as a process has to be sexy. It has to be somehow so cool that you keep the kids and the young people attracted the whole day. And also a large group or a small group attended and so on. So it's also very time-consuming, men taken. And at the end, not everybody knows how to do participatory design. I know some great architects. They are not able to talk even do a decent conversation with a teenager. They cannot break themselves down to a level to talk to them, which I think is okay. Not everybody of us has to do that, but nevertheless, it's a very challenging task, and we somehow have to have the persons who can do it. And I think educators, architecture educators, do have the skills to break down complex themes to children and young people, so I think they can be facilitator in participatory design and planning processes. Next slide. So I think when JAS started to shift from pure architecture education to participatory design, what we learned is using our methods, the things we have developed over the years, the approaches, and we use them in participatory design processes, that this was a smart way to do. Because you cannot say, let the public participate in planning means that they are able to do it. They don't know a lot of things. They need some tools and maybe background knowledge to be really participating. I mean, we have these different levels of participation, you know, the Einstein ladder of participation, and I think the higher we want to involve people into the design of spaces, the more knowledge and help we have to give them, because it is a demanding process, even for us, so you can imagine how demanding it is for the public to be part of it. So I'm very sure that architecture education is holding the ladder for participatory projects. Next. Examples. I have selected 3 projects, and I will go through them really quick because I don't have much time. And they are projects we did in the past years. I, for myself, did a lot of projects with young people. I don't know how this happened, but I shifted a lot to just working with teenagers. And I brought you 3 examples from different scales of participatory design. And the first one is an integrated neighborhood development plan that was to be made in the city of Aachen for one district there. Then we have a redesign of a plaza in Berlin and a public park and sports ground. But here it was the design of a street furniture element we did as a participatory project. Next slide. So first project, neighborhood development plan in Aachen, the city and JAS, we together applied to get extra money to do this participatory project. We got it from the state. And go one back, please. And to also, when we somehow knew what we wanted to do, we got a professional photographer to be part of this project. And we worked together in the neighborhood of Zurmond in Aachen, the city of Aachen, with students from a vocational secondary school, from a high school, and they were mainly aged 14 to 16 years. Next slide. What did we do? Of course, if you work with young people, teenagers, you have to do something cool, so we used the media they have. We had this suitcase walking around the neighborhood and did little clips with them showing what they thought about the different spaces in the neighborhood. Next slide. We also give them paintings because we wanted to alter the perception of the neighborhood. And ask them to go out and explore the neighborhoods and to find situations that resemble these paintings in composition, colors, or whatever they picked. And this task was done to simply because if you ask somebody what do they think about their neighborhood, often they start with a long list of negative things. Sometimes they don't even say one positive thing. And to somehow alter their view of the neighborhood, we use this exercise. Next slide. Finding beauty in a situation you never thought you would find. Next slide. Or finding art where you also not expected to be found. Next slide. We also, of course, discuss the findings. Next slide. We then do collages, models, where we envision future designs or uses in the neighborhood. Next slide. And here we got the city to close down a street to do a one-to-one experience with the young people, to also challenge them to rethink, for example, public space in a radical way. So what would happen if you close down a street? How could you use that space? Next slide. And we decided at the end, because I mean a neighborhood development plan, you know how that looks like? That is a plan like this and a book like this. That's not sexy to young people, and it's not a result to them. And that's not how they want to present their ideas. So we did postcards, giveaway postcards you get for free in bars and everywhere around the city. And here the photographer came along who did a shooting with the young people on different spaces in the neighborhoods, and we also got the city to do a billboard campaign with the ideas of the young people for their neighborhoods. And to them, that result was a lot more as a temporary, short-term result, a lot more important than the neighborhood plan. They felt we have been heard. Next slide. Next project was a live project for 12 master students of architecture, landscape planning and city planning. In education, planning and design education, project-based learning is a very standard thing. So they had a project and their task was to do participatory design, to think of a project. And Jas was partner in there. Next slide. So their task was to create an idea how this participation was to be done, and my part was to kind of like guide them a little and give them more ideas if they needed them. Next slide. They decided to develop with the students of a high school again in Berlin a game. They first did testing games. They were bringing in games from you can buy in the stores, and they were testing different games, and then the students together with the high school students decided we're going to do a role game, and this role game is going to be used to do participatory design with the neighborhood on the local plaza. Next slide. So here you see the students. You cannot tell who is high school student, who is my university students, and I tell you that's a great thing. My university students, they have a totally different level to talk to high school students than me. I can try to be not as teacher and not as professor-like as I want to. I'm still on that side. But my students, they have the same language, they get to them on an eye level. We as professionals never get. So it's a great experience to do participatory design with university students. Next slide. That's the game, the role game they developed. Next slide. And then, of course, testing. They went on the plaza on the weekend, on the market plaza. Next slide. And invited people to come and play the game about redesigning the plaza. So their result was not to come up with the design themselves, but with a tool we could use to find out what neighbors want and then come up with a design as professionals. Next slide. Do I have time for the last one? Okay, I do. Then the next one is design of street furniture for also in Berlin. And this is a great example. You see financing here, YAS, as we as a non-profit applied for some grant money, and some is good. It's the first time that we got a financing projects for 5 years. So that's a great thing for us. And we do here, this project was 2 years ago. Next time. Next slide. 5 years means we had 5 years of experience working with young people in different neighborhoods. Our aim was to work with youth about public space design. That was our aim. Next slide. As you can see in the pictures, we failed. We failed in the sense that we were not or hardly reaching, at least in this project, young people. We always rather the older kids. And what we learned is if you have the older kids, the teenagers don't come because it's very uncool to do a project with a 7-year-old. Okay, but still. Keep going. So we adjusted our methods and did the project. They collected ideas how the street furniture would look like. Next slide. We did model buildings of prototypes. Next slide. We got partners, again, carpenters, professional carpenters, who helped us to build actually the street furniture. Here you see them. The carpenter. And that's a YES member here, the lady. But you see, it was a great experience for the young kids. Teenagers did not come, young kids, to work with these heavy machines and so on. Next slide. This was the result. The older ones did come to look at it and they use it today, but the younger kids build it. Next slide. Very important, official pictures. The district manager of the city was there. The whole neighborhood you could see was there. Next slide. And I want to point out that as my last slide, this was the poster we hang up before we did this participatory process. And if you saw the results, it very much resembled them. And this is something we found out when we kind of like did our midterm reflection, get together about this project. We kind of like, how did it happen? And I think that is important in participatory design. I'm not analyzing why this happened, but just to reflect. How much are we influencing? And I think we are influencing, but we have to be aware of. And we can very strongly influence the design. We can put ourselves back. I think it very much depends on the situation, on the product we want at the end. I think some spaces, they ask for a very professional design because they are in the public space and maybe be used by others in the future, while others, there is a lot more important that they speak the language of vernacular architecture that comes very close to people's hearts a lot more. Nevertheless, I think that's a very important thing, that at the end of every participatory project, we have to kind of like be aware of what we did and learn from it for next projects. Okay, thank you.